Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this special webinar by Core Recruitment. Thank you very much for joining us today. It's Pride Month, which is fantastic, and we've got London Pride happening this Saturday. So we thought it would be a great time to have a webinar looking at all things LGBT and also how you can create the best policies, processes, and procedures when looking at the LGBT side of things as well. Just want to make a little comment about the situation in Norway over the weekend, which is obviously pretty horrendous for everybody. Everybody out this Saturday, hope you all take care, and it's a good Pride Day for everybody. Now we're going to be following the normal format where we're going to be working our way around the group to get a little bit about our speakers, a little bit of an introduction as to who they are, what they do in their day-to-day jobs. And then we'll be going into the discussion part of our webinar, and then we're also going to be looking at a couple of questions at the end about how we can create the best possible diverse working environments and inclusive working environments for our employees, etc. as well. So if you want to have any comments or questions, then please pop them into the chat on the bottom side of the screen or on the comments box on the right hand side of the screen. That would be great. Do also have to say that we were trying to get the most diverse panel that we could possibly get today, and we did ask lots of people from different elements of the community to come and join us. So if there is anyone out there who wants to join on future LGBT panels that are a little bit more diverse, then we'd be really interested to hear from you. So please get in touch with me after the webinar or at any point in terms of the activities that we do. So onto that introduction side of things, and if we start with you, Colin, if you can give us a little bit about yourself and your background, that would be great to get started.
Hi, I'm Colin Kimber. I am Associate Director at Pareto Facilities Management. I've been in the facilities management business for 16 years. It's something I really love. I really enjoy working with people and helping them develop and being the best they can be. From the LGBT plus perspective, I am on the committee of LGBT plus in facilities management, which is a industry-wide network where we come together to share best practice and support companies and individuals. And I run the inclusion committee at Pareto FM, and I'm on IWFM's ED&I steering group.
That's quite a list, Colin. Thank you very much for being here today. Much appreciated. Michael, we'll come on to you next.
Hi, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike Stocks. I am a I'm a freelance hospitality consultant. I spent just shy of 20 years working with Carlitos in a variety of roles, and then just conveniently pre-pandemic decided to go alone. And I work predominantly with startups and smaller business who are looking to kind of scale up. I also do some volunteering with some LGBT charities in the spare time that I do have. And yeah, I guess that's me.
Can you tell us a little bit about the charities you work with, Mike?
Yeah, so predominantly the main one I do a few things for is a great charity based in Stepney Green here in East London called Positive East. So looking to do events with themselves to, so general fundraising, and need some volunteering down at their offices when I have time.
Excellent. Okay, good. Thanks for being with us, Mike. Much appreciated. Daniel, we'll come on to you next.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Dan Foster. I'm the Head of Talent Acquisition for the UK and Ireland for Sodexo. I've been with them now for just coming up to 8 months. My background is predominantly recruitment from an HR perspective for the last 15 years or so, but working in a number of industries, as well as in-house, as well as agency recruitment as well. So predominantly the retail sector at the beginning of my career, and then moving into transport logistics, financial services, sustainable banking before joining Sodexo last year. In terms of my last organisation, I was in charge of their resourcing function as well as their DE&I and mental health agenda as well. So similar to Colin, I was the chair of the Inclusion Forum for the organisation as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much for joining us as well. Now we'll go into the discussion part of our webinar now. And with this, we're going to be going to each of the speakers with a different question. And then if they want to chip in, there's a little raise your hand button that you can do that with as well. I'm just also putting in the comments box, guys, if you've got any questions or anything that you want to chime in with as well, then please do feel free. So Colin, coming back to you first with how an inclusive workplace environment should be created, recognizing and embracing everyone's differences. Just a little question to get started off with there, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for that, Chris. I mean, there's there's all the obvious answers to this. So there's the whole, like, you know, leading from the top, making sure that there's senior buy-in and that sort of thing. Yes, those things are important, but I think that the key that I've found in creating an inclusive workplace environment that everybody can feel a part of is to actually focus on the inclusion side of things, because I think you know, ED&I has come a long way. When it was just about diversity, it tended to focus on why everyone was different and what that meant. But it started to move towards inclusion, and that's what we've done at Pareto, is because if I look at LGBT plus people, for instance, I think there's about 6 of us out of 250. So it's silly for us to only do things that speak to the LGBT plus people in the organization, when actually the more inclusive approach is to take everybody on that journey. And what we've done to support creating that culture is brought to the fore everybody's differences. So like we've looked at inclusion as a whole. We've created a safe environment where people are able to talk about their own diverse characteristics. And that's helped people. A lot of people with neurodiverse characteristics have actually become very open about their own situations. And it's helped build strong relationships and strong working relationships in those situations. And I suppose it's about finding opportunities in a broad, diverse spectrum to demonstrate to the wider employee base the value of things. Because a lot of straight white people look at these situations and think, well, that's not about me, so I don't know what to do. And by focusing on allyship and education and creating an environment where people can be questioning and not have to know what the answer is to everything and be able to make mistakes, it starts to create the kind of culture that, well, it becomes something that spreads very easily.
Michael, Daniel, anything you want to chip into that one? It's quite a large topic. Michael, coming to you next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what's interesting, particularly my perspective more recently, working with kind of smaller businesses, I think picking up a little what Colin said, for me, is business taking the opportunity in the first place to actually identify what those needs, if you like, are within the business. And I think sometimes, particularly for smaller organizations, I know it's a bit of a cliche, but even the whole kind of, anonymous staff surveys to kind of identify, within your team, what are these things that we need to make sure that we are being inclusive of and kind of supporting? Because as we know there are people who, whether it's to do with their sexuality or otherwise, who are very, open, very happy to kind of mention, kind of discuss it. Other people not, and I think sometimes it's difficult to know where to start if you don't actually know what you're dealing with in that sense. And I think that particularly, for me, getting the opportunity of to be able to do that anonymously in the first place is something really useful for businesses to actually look at their organization, work out what they need to do to be inclusive, as opposed to let's look at a tick box sheet or look at what other people are doing, because one size doesn't fit all, as I think we're well aware.
Excellent, thank you for that, Mike. Coming to Daniel next.
I mean, I absolutely agree with everything that Michael and Colin have said. I think for me, thinking about previous organisations where diversity's really started to accelerate and thinking about the focus it's had in recent years, just building on what Michael said, I think one of the key things for me was for that organisation to really be honest about where they are in that journey at that moment in time, and and recognising where do we want to have an impact, and then thinking about how and what they can put into place. For me, I'm always thinking about that external view as well. So thinking about how we attract people into the business. And I think for me, and this goes broader than the LGBT community, it's about representation, and it's about seeing yourself reflected in an organization's marketing materials, the careers website, whatever that might be. Because if I am an individual from a particular community or a particular protected characteristic, etc., and I don't see myself reflected in your news articles, your careers website, anything in that branding, then you've potentially lost that person, because they may feel I'm not going to be what this business is looking for, and you've potentially lost them before you've had the opportunity to engage with them.
Absolutely. I am just going to come on to Simon now. Simon is with Pride in London, and he's actually running the retail operation for them at the moment. And I'm going, I was expecting to see some shop facade background there, Simon, but if you can give us a little introduction to yourself and also answering that first question on how to create a good inclusive environment, that would be great.
God, no pressure. So in my day job, I work in retail and have done all of my life. I won't say how many years it is because I'm a lot older than what I look. Yeah, both on the retail and operations side. Sorry, both on the commercial and operations side for a variety of brands across the world and in the UK. And in my spare time, I am the events director for Pride in London. I think what it means to me is that somebody asked me this the other day, and I think you have to create these spaces within your workplace or wherever you might be, and ensure that people feel comfortable to be themselves wherever they might be. So I think you have to start somewhere. So I was speaking to a small tech startup firm the other day that's just literally a fledgling company, and it was really important to them to start off on the right footing. And I said to them, you should never assume, and you should always try and create that safe space. And he said, well, how do you do it? And I said, well, you talk about it. Start by talking about it. And sometimes it's often the most simplest steps that you need to take, that people sometimes overlook. And likewise, last year I was talking to a large charity that has a selection of museums across the UK who are starting out on their inclusion journey. They had policies and procedures, but they hadn't felt that they'd been embedded correctly. And I said, you have to start talking about this and set up networks and form safe spaces for people to come together and discuss inclusion or diversity. But you particularly have to create some spaces for LGBT plus individuals. It's interestingly exactly how the chief executive of Citibank, when she took to power or took on the role, started with their inclusion journey. She created an LGBT plus network. Initially there was 2, and then there was 100. So I think it's about having those conversations. But I am no D&I expert, I should add, even though I work for Pride in London. I take all of my inspiration and knowledge from all of you on this call. So
excellent. We'll stick with Simon for the next question. I think he's on slightly limited time, but just leading on from your last point in terms of the role of businesses and advocacy around employment rights and workplace inclusion. What are your thoughts on that, Simon?
I think look, nobody's solved the diversity and inclusivity crisis across the globe, and I think that's something we need to recognise, and I think that's something we need to face into really quickly. And Chris, who is our executive director at Pride in London, he's an award-winning diversity and inclusivity person. He was saying to me the day that people are more attracted to joining employers when they can see people like them, particularly the Black and brown community. If they see people, on the website that look like them, then they will join. I don't believe, and I've worked for a number of multinational companies, FTSE 100 companies over the years. I accept that I and many of the organizations that I've worked for, and those that even sometimes approach us to partner at Pride in London, don't work hard enough to ensure or aren't working hard enough or aren't facing into D&I hard enough. Sorry, does that answer your question, Christian? Sorry.
It does. I'm going to take it because I know that Sodexo do a hell of a lot of work around this space, and they also do a lot of work in terms of organizational culture, in terms of allowing people to be themselves at work. So I wanted to bring in Daniel at this point as well. So Daniel, can I get your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I very much agree with Simon. I don't think, any organization has 100% cracked it. It's been a hot topic for many years now, and I think inclusion has probably been catapulted to the forefront even more so during COVID in some of the global events that took place during that 2-year period. For us at Sodexo, because of the size of our business, in the region alone, for the UK and Ireland, we've got around 36,000 employees. So there's the volume of individuals there where specific networks for different elements of inclusion can work very, very well. We are very lucky that we have, as I say, a number of networks, whether that's for the LGBT community, whether that's women working group, disability, age, right across the inclusion side of things, and they work extremely well for us because, as we've talked about before, it creates that safe space for people to be themselves. They can hear from senior leaders. We talk a lot about that message coming from the top, and I think when you hear from the senior team or people that you have some form of affiliation to because you see yourself again reflected in them, or they've had a similar career journey, or there's something where in that affinity effect you feel connected to, then that's what creates that sense of belonging.
Absolutely. I'll bring Colin back in at this point because he's nodding emphatically with everything you're saying there.
So yeah, I agree with that. For me, there's a bit outside that as well. I think that society's culture in general and governments it's quite slow moving, and I think that business and the workplace has got a fantastic opportunity to influence millions of people in their workspaces, creating cultures where people are able to be themselves more, and expose expose everybody else to the differences in society, and that could actually bleed out into society and influence government. I come to, like, there's been a hell of a lot of scaremongering around trans in this country over the last little while, and in LGBT and FM we were looking at a separate study that had been done that showed that the general public actually had a completely different opinion towards trans in society, and were generally very accepting and wanted people to just be able to be themselves. So actually that showed that there's a big difference between what society actually thinks and what the government is saying is going on. And I think the workspace is a fantastic opportunity to change hearts and minds and get people to learn about the differences and why that is such a wonderful thing.
Absolutely. And specifically looking, I mean, obviously kind of like with Mike and Daniel, etc., it's kind of like a little bit more on the hospitality side of things, but traditionally the kind of like hard services, FM, that technical services, engineering side of things, Colin, it hasn't always been the most LGBT friendly. Can you tell us a little bit specifically about some of the initiatives you've driven and anything that you've had to overcome in that space?
Well, I mean, overcoming is the easy bit. So, like, yeah, I mean, I hid for years, and I had to spend a lot of time working with engineering teams that like to make lots of jokes and pretend that I fancied them all, and that that's why I was buying them cakes, because it was about fancying them and not about team engagement and stuff like that. I don't think any of them had looked in the mirror at all, because that was absolutely not the case. But so. I don't know. I mean, at one company I worked for, I felt like there was a bit of a rainbow ceiling, because I felt like I went on the development trajectory just as well as everybody else that was at my level in the organization, and we all went on the same courses and achieved the same things. And then the opportunities always seemed to go elsewhere, and I couldn't really get my head around that until I heard about something that had been said at quite a senior level about homosexuality being a lifestyle choice. So it kind of made me feel like they were never going to really get me. And to be honest, that's what started my search for an alternative place. But Pareto has been a completely different thing. I've been so I'm able to be completely open with everybody that I work with, the FM teams, the front of house, and the engineering teams. And actually, it's created much more understanding in them. And we're able to have some quite interesting conversations, because for me, it's quite an eye-opener, because I think because of my generation, I'm always a little bit hesitant, because I come from, I was a teenager in the 80s when you had to hide or you would get beaten up in the street because you were spreading AIDS. But a lot of people that I speak to in the engineering world, they think that this isn't a problem anymore. They think, well, everything's fine. I don't see this. And when I start saying to them, well, in the last 6 months, someone shouted "puff" at me in the street, and they don't realize that this still happens. So it's I suppose that's the success factor, is being able to get it on the table. Sometimes I've found that actually it's my own feelings about my own experience that stop things from happening, because I assume I'm not going to be understood, or I assume I'm going to have a negative reaction from someone. But I have learned over time that actually, if you act like there's a problem, then people don't know what to do and they get all awkward. And the best thing to do is just to put it out there in front of everybody, and then you deal with how everyone reacts to it.
All right. I mean, Michael, for you stepping in and out of lots of different companies at the moment through your consultancy work, I guess, how do you introduce it, and what do you look for when you're looking to partner with a business?
Yeah, very good question. Again, it's interesting looking at different companies, particularly at the kind of the level most of them are when I kind of joined them, that I've worked with businesses again with, kind of almost single digit numbers of employees who have have taken steps to have, whether it's so working groups involved, policies, procedures, and real kind of involvement. Others whom, I say winging it, and they mention their names, but even from systems process and the whole kind of bigger picture. And I think for me, key thing for me is almost that kind of simple, just that visibility piece of, pretty much from day one, I'm not, I don't necessarily wait to announce it my very first day in the building. But if somebody asks a question, just the whole kind of chit chat, it's like, yeah, I'm gay, I'm married. They mentioned about my husband, but it's like, but it's just in that whole kind of, I'm just me. And I think that sometimes, is a useful kind of starting point for people in business, where it's like, okay, somebody's coming, it's like, okay, it depends. So there's various levels, because obviously sometimes I'm dealing at, owner or board level, other times, if it's a bit more operational, kind of with the teams, but very much take the approach of just me be me, and in the hope that with these particularly these kind of smaller businesses, that almost inadvertently you're kind of starting a little bit of that kind of process of, it's just, there's a here's something that we're doing that we have no issue with this, we're kind of supportive, and I think just that awareness piece maybe.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that, Michael. Going to come back on to Simon, and there was a really interesting part that was brought up earlier regarding the trans community, and it would be really good to get your take on what we could be doing to support that more, and a little bit more about Pride in London and what they're doing in that space specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. This is something that's quite dear to me, and I have many friends that have transitioned over a number of years. One who you'll be very familiar with in terms of public profile. So Munro Bergdorf is a really good friend of mine, and I think some of her experiences are well lived out on social media. And I echo some of the stories and some of her lived experiences that she shared with the public, particularly for some of those big brand names that she was a part of many years ago. But I think it goes back to what I was saying, never assume, and it's always about how someone presents themselves. And creating those safe spaces for people to be themselves, and understanding and never assuming how somebody is or how somebody presents themselves. You have to be authentic to them, just as they have to be authentic to you. Something that we've done over the years is we have a trans network of individuals that come together and meet regularly. We have a number of trans groups that are working with us this year and are marching. We will never, as an LGBT plus community, agree on everything. And of course, there are many topics and many discussions that go on that often divide us. But I think on the main, there's more that we have in common than necessarily that divides us. Of course, we all have our opinions on pronouns and how people identify. But by and large, everybody is shooting for equality and everyone to be treated equally. And that's indeed what the trans community want. They want to be treated equally. And when you look at the Gender Reform Act Amendment Bill that the current government has sort of sidelined, that's a really important step forward in terms of healthcare rights for trans people. They don't get the same healthcare rights as the four of us may have on this call. However, we need to do more in that space. And thinking about businesses have opportunities to influence this, because particularly big business, you know, when you are talking to your MP or when you are talking to government or when you are mixing with people that have an opportunity to influence change, it's important to bring up those topics. So at a recent meeting with a chief executive from a PLC who had been talking to in the car on the way to this meeting, there was an MP in the room, and they were asking him about how business was and what more the government could be doing around infrastructure on transportation. And he said to them, there's a lot I could say about that, but before I do, I want to know what your government's doing around the Gender Recognition Act. So had I not been in the car with him on the way to that meeting, then maybe he may not have talked about the Gender Recognition Act or even ending conversion therapy. So I think it's really important that the part that the societal role we have to play and utilizing our connections and our networks and through business to influence change for the better is important. But with regards to the trans community and every element of our community, it's important to be informed and have knowledge. And often we get that knowledge through lived experiences that we'll see on social media or building relationships with the trans community. Mostly when you meet a trans individual, they just want to be understood, and they want people to understand their journey and what it took for them to get there, and they want to be included within society, and they want to be treated equally, just as the five of us, Christian, on this call want to be. So, yeah.
That's a really good statement, Simon. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to just bring in Daniel at this point, because I mean, again, coming back to the Sodexo side of things, and you had a phenomenal head of D&I, Margot Slattery, who's been on a couple of our webinars previously, no longer with Sodexo, but was telling us a little bit about some of the work that you guys do internationally, especially when you're influencing in countries where, you know, maybe LGBT rights aren't at the forefront. Can you tell us a little bit more about Sodexo and its policy on that side of things, Daniel?
Yes, absolutely. So we have a global head of DE&I, so someone that's accountable across the organisation, as well as then heads of D&I in the relevant regions right across the group. It's something that that I'm exploring to understand a bit more about, as I say, because I'm still relatively new to the organisation itself. But I do know that our head of DE&I for the UK works quite regularly to, as you say, to kind of really sort of challenge those assumptions and to think about how do we try and do what's within our gift to help shape the conversation outside of just the UK. So what we don't want to do is just ensure that things are just centric to our region. We want to ensure that we're trying to have an impact on a global scale where possible as well.
Absolutely. I'll come back on to Colin. Same question, Colin.
Sorry, I'm muting myself there. What are we doing?
Yes.
from an infrastructure perspective, we're constantly reviewing all of our internal policies. And I think what we've realized is that there's value in talking about the fact that you've done a review to ensure that they are inclusive, even if there's not much change. Because I think a lot of people, people feel like they need to make big gestures and big changes, but actually it's about talking about the fact that you've done something and you have got to a point where it's inclusive. That's fine. That actually sends the right messages out to people, because people that come from a diverse background hear these messages. They're like the dog whistles for us. They're the moments where we go, people get us. They get what we're talking about. From my perspective, I mean, we're still relatively small. I suppose I would describe us as an awkward teenager now as a business, but we're getting to the point now where we're starting to realize that there are a number of contractors that we work with a lot across a wider patch. So we're now starting to have proper conversations around how we can support them in their EDI journey, but also how we can work together and the kind of behaviors that we expect from them when we come to agreements about how we're going to work together. Because part of this is also about attaching the need to place value on this to money, because that's one way that you can influence people that perhaps think this isn't important to actually toe the line. And we go a little bit further than, like, it's not just a case of ticking a box and sending us a copy of your diversity policy. It's about talking about the real things that you're doing. So yeah, and I think we've changed the way that we approach inclusion as an organization. I know we've been doing it and doing it loudly for a very long time, but when we first started we were just doing a lot of random stuff that needed to be kind of brought together. And when we did, after the first year of running the inclusion committee, we realized that our entire focus had been external to us. It was all about shouting about causes and waving a flag when something came up. And we realized that we weren't focusing inward as a business. And actually that's how we were going to generate the kind of content that we wanted to talk about, which is talking about the things that you're doing yourselves. And so that has enabled us to start sharing best practice. So on a number of occasions, I've been asked by my customers if I can come in and actually talk about this kind of subject with their people, to talk about how they can develop things. And we are seeing the fruit of that activity, because although we still take part in traditional tenders and stuff like that for business, because that's part of the way that the FM business works, we're often approached by organizations that see us and see themselves in us and want to work together because we have similar cultures and we believe in the same things and feel like we can go on the same journey together. It also, Daniel was talking about recruitment earlier, it also is starting to happen that way as well. People seek us out because they want to work for us because of what we're about from an EDI perspective.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Colin. Now we're going to work around the group now. Everyone's kind of like last 2 minutes in terms of hints, tips, suggestions, what kind of organizations can be doing, anything that you've done previously within businesses, which has kind of created a really good positive response, and any other bits that you haven't managed to get into your allotted slot in the webinar so far. We've just had Colin, so we'll circle back to him at the end. But Michael, if you want to go first, that would be great.
Absolutely, thank you. I'll keep it brief. I think the two key things really for me, one, picking up a little what it was Colin was mentioning earlier about how businesses have the opportunity to actually influence society rather than kind of vice versa. And I think for me, it's just ensuring that businesses, where they have that opportunity, are doing all they can for that more sort of ideal world. And I think a part of that for me is also just their consistency in terms of approach. So as well as ensuring that policies, process, procedures in place. Also, whether it's things like sort of staff behaviours, making sure that people are treated, or if need be, disciplined or managed in the same way, regardless of the approach. I think sometimes, particularly with smaller businesses, there can be kind of inconsistencies where a joke can be made about one thing that you wouldn't dream of doing about something else. And I think that's something which sends that almost that subliminal message of something being acceptable when it's not. And I think that's where from kind of strong leadership, just to ensure you have consistency across the board in terms of everything from your your policies, procedures, but also how you're acting sort of day to day, and making inclusivity kind of key for everybody, irrespective of
Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Much appreciated. Simon, we'll come on to you next.
I think it's about being visible, no? And being your authentic self. I think that's what I take with me through organizations. So that the organization I'm working for in my day job, they don't have an LGBT plus network, but I am very acutely aware that there are a number of people that are part of the community, and I think that it's about, you know, being your authentic self at work and being confident enough in the 22nd or 21st century to be yourself, and have those conversations at the right level to enable that to happen. But yeah, I could go on about loads of things around this, but it's a great question to ask. But one of the things that I'd say is be visible, and be your authentic self, and just make sure that there's space for others to join you on your crusade, wherever you might be.
That is excellent, Simon. Thank you very much. And just a quick snapshot, what can we expect this weekend in London Praise? Oh
my God, there's so much going on. It's just ridiculous. I don't know where to start. There is a list to my right of things.
Your highlights.
And no to do a lot of last minute things happening that will be great, and I think after 2 years, thanks to the pandemic, let's not talk about that, this year is definitely going to come back with a big bang, and that's what was felt at New York Pride this year. So expect millions of people to descend on London, being visible and being their authentic selves, and many allies to support us. But yeah, Ava Max, I know you all like names, so there's Ava Max, and there's Cat Burns, and there's Netta, and many other artists out there. But I will tell you to watch out for Ring the Alarm, who won Pride's Got Talent at Her Majesty's Theatre on Sunday night. I can't think what day we're on, who was spotted up that night by Sony BMG, and they've just signed them, and they're predicting them to be the new Little Mix. So yeah, loads of entertainment, really great speakers, lots of community activism going on. Who knows what the GLF will say, who are on a stage. They mobbed the Mayor of London stage the other night. They are not all in agreement around a number of things, and they're on our stage. So I have no idea what they're going to say. So I have no doubt it will be protest, power, and fun over the weekend. So be there or be square is my answer to that.
Oh, it's going so well until he said be there or be square. God.
Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know what the words are.
Making dreams come true every day, Simon. Every day. Exactly. Brilliant. Love that. Thank you very much for being with us. Much appreciated. Daniel, we'll come on to you next.
Yes, I hugely agree with Simon in terms of that word authenticity. I think for any organization, it's also about being really honest as well. You know, there are so many businesses that are starting out on their journey at the moment with regards to the broader topic of inclusion, and so many people don't know where to start. And I think, you know, coming from organizations who were really starting out on that journey is to have that marker in the sand of looking at what data you have in front of you, whether that's an anonymous survey, whether that's information from your ATS or your HR system, and just seeing where you are, you know, as a snapshot at this moment in time, and thinking about how you want to have that impact. I think from a senior leader point of view, it's about them understanding the role that they play within the business, within their teams, within the wider society in terms of shaping that conversation. And then I think for that middle manager and individual contributor level, it's about getting their involvement as well. I think the last example, which actually goes outside of LGBT, actually was in a previous business where we were trying to plan for Black History Month in October. And there was one of those light bulb moments when we realized that actually we had no input from the wider business, and everyone sat around the table were white people trying to decide what we were going to do for Black History Month. And actually it was one of those obvious things that we're all sat here laughing and, you know, nodding our heads of why didn't you do it? But sometimes it is that odd light bulb moment of going, why on earth have we not asked our people? Why on earth do we not have that representation when we already thought we were being quite inclusive? So it's just to have that fishbowl lens rather than that sort of tunnel mentality, and getting those different levels of buy-in from either end of the spectrum in the organisation.
Really, really great suggestion. Thank you very much for that, Daniel, and thanks for being with us as well. Much appreciated. And finally, we'll come back to Colin. Final thoughts, Colin?
I think I've got a bit of advice for people that find themselves in a leadership role where being visible. So, like as Simon was saying, be visible and all that sort of thing. It can take its toll on you, and I think you need to acknowledge that. And I think that you need to take care of yourself, but you do absolutely need to embrace your gay job because it is important. And if you take care of yourself and remain connected to the impact that you can have, then I think that can keep your energy up and make you realize how important it is. I had towards the end of the pandemic, I had a sort of slightly quiet time where I kind of stepped back because I just felt like it was always me talking about the gay agenda and all this sort of stuff, and I just thought, come on, let somebody else say something. But I kind of had a bit of a realization when I thought, you know what, actually, like you were saying at the beginning, it would have been nice to have had a really diverse panel today, but people didn't step forward on this occasion. But that doesn't mean that what we've got to say is not valid, because so I would say don't if you're a white gay male, don't stop yourself speaking because you're white and gay. You've got something to say, and it's very valuable, and it means a lot to people that weren't there when we were young. We didn't have any of this to see. And there are people out there now that are listening to us talk and seeing us out there, and that's making them feel braver about being their authentic selves.
That's such a good note to finish on. Thank you very much for that, Colin, and thank you very much for being with us. Much appreciated. Well, guys, I think that was a really interesting session. We got some really good different viewpoints in there, which is brilliant. If you are watching this before the 28th of July, we have got our next LGBT event coming up, and we've got Linda Riley, who's the publisher of Diva magazine, who's coming along, and we're being hosted by the lovely people at Portico and Cersei's, who are giving us a little space in the private members club in the Gherkin. So it's going to be quite a good one, guys. So if you would like to come along, then please message us and get the details, but they're all over our social media feeds as well. So I know there's lots of different prides happening elsewhere in the country, but especially for London Pride this week, have a great time, guys, and we shall hopefully see you very soon and at the next webinar. Bye now. Bye.